Good afternoon and welcome to the channel. This is Alfred Green. By all means, take a moment to like, share, subscribe. Earlier this week, I gave a verbal testimony. I've written a book called Let's Excavate, which is available on Amazon.com, and just simply gave a video testimonial, which was rather cumbersome. And so this is me being intentional about finding my audience. I know God is going to do great things, but um, I'm sitting down today to read chapter number 1, which is called Perversion. And it goes it touches on what I talked about briefly earlier this week. And so without further ado, this is chapter 1 of my book, Let's Excavate, and it's entitled Perversion. Everything God created was good, and everything God created in creation is functioning according to its first command from God, except for man. Cows are still mooing, dogs are still barking, and ducks are still quacking. However, some children today are identifying themselves as animals or even having conversations concerning their sexual identity and orientation. The rainbow, once associated with God's promise, specifically in the story of Noah's Ark in the Bible. According to the story, after the great flood, God placed a rainbow in the sky as a sign of his covenant and promised to never destroy the earth by flood. In recent times, the rainbow is now the symbol for the LGBTQ plus community. Revelations 4:3 says, "Around the throne was a rainbow." More so, the burning of incense in the temple not only created a fragrant offering to God, but it was also thought to purify the space and create a sacred atmosphere for religious ceremonies. Now, burning sage has become a norm for warding off or cleansing a space from evil spirits, as if prayer has been deemed ineffective. Perversion, as defined in the Oxford Dictionary, is the alteration of something from its original course, meaning or state to a distortion or corruption of what was first intended. A secondary definition is a sexual behavior or desire that is considered abnormal or unacceptable. As it related to the life I chose to live, I willfully and intentionally believed in a manner that was contrary or against what God expected or required of me. Ancestral evil altars, covenants, and generational curses are a few reasons why a spirit of perversion is prevalent in the lives of people. It may lay dormant in an individual, but most times it's evident or rears its head early in life. The actions of a child that makes us laugh as adults could be a sign of demonic influence at work. A child who uses profanity or one who rips their diapers off and runs through the living room naked could potentially be a sign of things to come. Witchcraft or divination is at an all-time high in our society. I recently had someone tell me they hear from God, but were also addicted to tarot card readings. Imagine the look of confusion on my face at hearing this. Those two simply can't coexist. One will cancel out the other. Many people are playing with witchcraft and are opening doors to demonic divination, darkness, principalities, and spirits, and wonder why you're literally catching hell. Crystals, Wicca, rune casting, tea leaf readings, automatic writing, water scrying, voodoo, hoodoo, moon water, tarot cards, psychics, astrologers, Ouija boards, sage burning to ward off bad spirits, and even these innocent Facebook games that tell you your future. All of this is witchcraft. You don't need a game to predict your future when your identity and purpose is found in the Word of God or by spending quality time with the Creator. By participating in any of the aforementioned acts, you are in an agreement or covenant with the enemy, and he goes to great lengths to get a return on his investment. Whenever a pact is forged by the devil by establishing a covenant, there's always a heavy price to be paid. For such dark bargains never come without dire consequences. Those consequences of those bargains often involve losing one's soul, enduring eternal damnation, endless torment, and even death. Additionally, they might involve sacrificing loved ones, losing your family, living in constant fear, or experiencing a twisted and cursed life where nothing goes as planned. For me, molestation ushered in homosexuality through a spirit of perversion. I'm discovering as I write this book that my forefathers also dabbled in divination heavily. In Genesis chapter 1, which details the history of creation, there's a law of God that stated at least 10 times that everything God created will produce after its own kind. If there is a generational spirit of perversion attached to your bloodline, contrary to popular opinions, you can be born gay. Traits and DNA can be passed down from parents to their offsprings through heredity. This is how genetic information is transmitted across generations. Each person inherits a combination of genes from both parents, which influences various characteristics such as physical appearance, healthy predispositions, and even certain behaviors. Make no mistake about it, God did not make you gay. That trait could have trickled down in your DNA. Genesis 1:27. So God created man in his image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. You are created in the image of God, and through his creation, we are to function in his divine environment. You and I are the highest form of God's creation. We are spirit, believing, flesh, feeling, soul, thinking, and the devil wants to destroy all three. For individuals who know witchcraft was a common practice amongst your ancestors, have you considered that you simply may have been the sacrificial offering made by a family member who wanted something that wasn't attainable long before you got here? As I indicated, that sacrifice may not be you per se, nor will you outlive the curse, but it could hit your lineage in generations to come. Exodus 20:4-6 states that you shall not make for yourself an image in form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sins of their parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. Perhaps as a parent, you have to take off from work to go up to the school and get with the teacher because your child was acting out in class for no apparent reason. I remember a time when if you got in trouble at school, before they called your parents, depending on the infraction, your teacher would conduct the discipline. They'd stop teaching, go next door, and get another teacher so they can bear witness to you being paddled. Now you can get hurt, fired, or may even lose your life because some of these kids are angry, and most of them have valid reasons to be. If you aren't seeking the Holy Spirit for clarity as it relates to your child, some things cannot be dismissed as a growing phase, fad, or any excuse a parent may make for not spending time with their child. It very well could be a demonic entity at work. When I was molested at 5, I didn't have a clue how that would shape not only my sexual attraction, but it dramatically impacted and increased my appetite for sex as well. In order to understand who I am, I had to go back to where it all started. I realized there were voids in my life that I was aware of, but didn't know how to voice them properly at a young age so they could be fully comprehended by those who cared for me. Voids had a significant impact on my life. Throughout the years, I tried filling these voids with various things from sex, relationships, hobbies, or material possessions. However, those fillers only provided temporary relief. I still felt empty. For some, that emptiness can lead to a sense of disconnection, loneliness, and even depression. The lack of a male role model, even though my stepfather was present, left me with an unquenchable void of longing to be with, or at the very least have a relationship with my father. That never really happened. I was on the prayer line one morning. I lifted up the same petition for power as I've done so many times before, but this time it was refuted. The question was raised by the facilitator. If God gave you a coat, would you keep asking for one? In my befuddled state, I failed to realize that the thing I'd been asking God for was already inside of me, lying dormant, but was not fully tapped into or realized. You see, even though I recanted my story many times, when I thought about the voids in my life, I discerned I had power, even at the age of 5. I just didn't realize it, nor did I understand where it came from, or more importantly, how I got it. The power was being attacked through perversion. That morning on the prayer line, I perceived the power I was seeking I already possessed. That revelation hit me like a ton of bricks and I began to sob uncontrollably. At the 5 on the side of the La Quinta Hotel, I was forced to perform oral sex on an older guy who was a friend of the family. I remember how his eyes rolled back as I took his member into my mouth and bobbed up and down on it slowly as instructed. I stole another glance and now his eyes were closed. Power. He started yelling some expletives while the act was taking place. I thought I was doing something wrong, but when I stopped, the moaning ceased. Through clenched teeth, he said, "Monkey, keep on going. This feels like heaven." I started back up and I must have been doing something right because the cussing started back and his breathing became heavy. He pushed my head away as he began to ejaculate onto the sidewalk. "Boy, that mouth of yours is powerful," he stated as he shook his member and stuffed it back into his pants. These encounters happened frequently as I had to pass his home every day after school on my way to my grandmother's house. The more we met, the more vulgar it became. It went from him ejaculating onto the sidewalk to me catching it in my mouth to eventually swallowing it. I didn't tell anyone as I felt no one would understand. Even if I did tell, would anyone believe me? Would I be teased? Would I get punished? After all, in my 5-year-old mind, what harm was being done? I wasn't hurting anyone. He reminded me how good it felt with each encounter, so what's the big deal? Though this would have to be our secret, I didn't want anyone I loved getting hurt. Consequently, every time he met me on side the road, I knew what he wanted. I can't recall why or when he stopped meeting me on my way home, but it did come to an abrupt end. That void left me yearning for more. In my adult years, I used to blame my molester because once that switch is turned on, it's hard to turn it off. As a young boy struggling with his sexual identity, I sought the thrill or the power that I witnessed as his eyes rolled back and he closed them at the sexual gratification I was providing him through oral stimulation. Meeting him gave me a sense of purpose and I had the power to make him cuss and come. However, as I got older, I consciously sought out male companionship. I no longer could blame him as these entanglements gave me pleasure and I'd become a willing participant. No one had to force me. It was something I enjoyed. One of my anchor scriptures is Jeremiah 29:11, which says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope in the future." The devil thought if he could molest the power God had given me from birth, it would cause me to become fearful, stagnant, and avoid my purpose due to my own sexual proclivities. For a long time, it worked as stagnation and fear trickled into my adult years. I realized over time God truly had a purpose and a plan for me. While God was planning, the devil was plotting. That spirit of perversion was at work and working overtime at that. Studies have shown that most individuals who are molested early in life experience sexual difficulties, including problems with physical contact and intimacy. Some commonly signs of sexual abuse are self-esteem issues, anxiety, depression, substance abuse, disassociation, guilt, and an increased risk of suicide. Other implications are eating disorders, insomnia, isolation, betrayal, gastrointestinal issues, and individuals have a tendency to develop trust issues over time. Childhood molestation doesn't always include penetration. Other forms of molestation include, but aren't limited to, touching of private parts, exposure of genitalia, taking pornographic pictures, rape, or inducement of sexual acts with the molester or with other children, and variations of this act. My mother had gotten a better paying job around the ages of 7 and 8, and we were able to move into a duplex community in Lake Jackson off of Weesach. While playing outside, an older Hispanic man would sit on his porch and watch me play. He had a jungle in front of his yard. One day he beckoned me over and offered me candy. He had plants everywhere. Some were growing along the sidewalk, some in pots, while others hung on the front porch. I don't know many kids then at my age who didn't want candy. Unlike the world we live in today, it really was about community and villages. There weren't any Amber Alerts, nor were there a lot of violence where we lived. He didn't appear threatening. What harm could this possibly be? Initially, it seemed innocent until he stopped offering me candy on the front porch. He told me if I wanted some candy, I'd have to meet him on the back porch of his duplex. Once we were inside, I quickly realized it wasn't candy he wanted as I noticed a bulge jumping up and down in his tight bell-bottom pants. It pulsed the same way as it felt when I placed my heart over my chest to say the Pledge of Allegiance at school. Thump, 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 thump. This was starting to feel like what took place on the side of the hotel a few years ago. The void I experienced was now being filled by someone else. He asked if I wanted to touch it, and with a gesture of my head, he took my hand and placed it on the bulge. Once again, I found myself on my knees, but this time it wasn't anything like praying before bed with Mama. Traditionally, kneeling is specifically chosen for prayer because it's a posture that conveys humility, surrender, or worship. When it's done for any purpose other than prayer or sincere reverence for God, it can become an act of idolatry when it symbolizes placing something or someone above God in one's heart or life. When we kneel before God in prayer, it's a physical acknowledgement of His sovereignty and our dependence on Him. By kneeling, we physically demonstrate our recognition of a higher power's authority and our own dependence on that power. However, when kneeling is directed towards another person, cause, or object with the same reverence we'd offer to God, it can subtly become an act of misplaced devotion. This doesn't necessarily mean that all instances of kneeling are idolatrous, but when we begin to elevate that person, cause, or object in our hearts above God's values and guidance, it can create an idol in our lives. Ironically, every time I would participate in oral sex, I felt as if I was turning my back on God as I knelt down on my knees, a posture generally reserved for communicating with Him. The actual act became an altar and an idol as I praised and professed my love for what was taking place. Every moment was a form of worship. I equated sex with love and recklessly attempted to fill the voids from my childhood by this type of love. I was devoted, fully submitted, and actively engaged until the point of climax closed the curtain of each scene with different actors. Though these thoughts invaded my mental capacity, due to the stronghold of perversion and the oral sex spirit that had its grip on me, those thoughts were not sufficient enough to make me turn away from indulging in the act I was putting before God. An inner conflict filled every crevice of my being each time I displayed adoration and affection for what I was doing while on my knees. Idolatry can take many forms, often arising when we give excessive time, energy, and loyalty to something that begins to influence our decisions, identity, or beliefs more than God. Over time, this act of kneeling, whether figurative or literal, can shape one's priorities, making it hard to remain focused on God and His purpose for one's life. Thus, it's essential to examine why we're kneeling or prioritizing something and to ensure it aligns with a heart that's ultimately kneels before God alone. He then unzipped his pants and stepped out of his bell bottoms as I knelt with my hand wrapped around his shaft. Before I could bring his member to my lips, he too began to cuss, letting out audible moans as I started bobbing up and down on it. Unlike before, this time I knew how to bring a man to climax as I was coached on the right way to do it. Pull that dick out. Spit on it. Go faster. Watch your teeth. Slow down. Use your hands. Look around the tip like you're sucking a lollipop. I was even showed how to hide my teeth by pulling my lips down over them like Miss Jenkins looked as if she didn't have any teeth in her mouth. Suddenly he made me stop and then told me to pull my shorts down. This never happened as I wasn't accustomed to being on the receiving end. As he eased my shorts down, he fondled the head of my penis before taking it in his mouth. This, however, was completely different from the first encounter on side of the motel. His mouth was wet and extremely warm. Even at a young age, I enjoyed that feeling that was taking place inside of his home. After our initial encounter, he never wanted me to reciprocate. Instead, he took pleasure in me. This went on until we moved out of our neighborhood to a town called Freeport. Life went on as normal. Fearful of my new living surroundings, I suppressed the feelings I had for boys or men because I didn't want to be called a sissy like my mother's friend Maxine, who liked to dress up like a lady but sounded like a man. We lived in Freeport for a few years and then moved back into the old duplex community, this time on Pecan Lane. However, prior to moving back into the old neighborhoods, I'd gotten violated by the way of penetration by an older cousin in the shower. He came over after church one day to swim in the pool at the apartment complex we lived in. Because we were boys, we had to shower together. He instructed me to take the soap and lather up my booty real good. I did as instructed. He then told me to bend over, which I complied. He inserted himself into me, but the pain was too unbearable as he forced himself inside. There was an extreme burning sensation. I began to cry due to the pain of being ripped open, as he put his hand over my mouth to stifle my cry for help. I quickly shifted, causing him to fall out. I didn't particularly like that feeling. I dried off, and he and I never discussed that day until 2018 when he was released from prison. I simply asked if he remembered it happened. He didn't deny it, nor did he apologize. I couldn't be mad at him because by then I'd chosen to live a homosexual lifestyle. When we moved back into the old neighborhood, I walked around getting reacquainted with old friends who still live there. I noticed a porch with a lot of plants. I thought it couldn't possibly be. As I approached the porch, he came out. He smiled at me and told me to come in. I already knew what he wanted. Besides, I haven't been in any situation over the past 3 years, so I didn't need to be lured in with candy. I welcomed his invitation like a parent being reunited with a child after years of separation. The world has taught us that people who have been abused to embrace a victim's mentality. It's not your fault. However, this time I was a willing participant. And from the ages of 11 to 14, I was climbing out of my bedroom window and sneaking into his back door to allow him to pleasure me. One day, I snuck into my aunt's house and stumbled across a VHS tape that had the word fantasy on it. I'd never seen porn before. Should we stumble across ripped out penthouse or Playboy pictures, but never a movie with horrible acting and musical scores playing in the background. One day while watching fantasy and rubbing myself, I started shooting white cream out and initially thought I'd broken something. It just kept oozing and oozing out, but it made my body convulse and spasm. I never felt anything like this before. Though I enjoyed the pleasure his mouth provided, this felt much better than his mouth on me. Through excitement, I shared with him what happened to me at my aunt's house, and it seemed like he wanted me overnight and day. And between him swallowing my babies, I began to explore my sexuality by self-pleasure. I was masturbating 3 to 7 times a day. Eventually, I stopped going to his house, and by this time, we were moving out of the neighborhood and into another home on Bodart. I was from a small town where everyone knows everyone's business. I couldn't fathom friends and people discovering the secret pleasures I'd been indulging in throughout the years, so I suppressed my sexual urges once again. I started to feel the pressure from guys I ran with to have sex. I covered up my desires for men by hanging around girls in hopes my peers would think I was sleeping with the women I hung around with, which was far from the truth. Even though shame and guilt made me silent, it didn't slow down my performance in my scholastic pursuits. I was still able to maintain my grades and excel in sports. Excelling was a way to hide the double life I was living. However, other individuals may act out or experience drastic personality changes. I eventually had my sexual encounter with a woman at the age of 21, but after being exposed to so many men, it just didn't feel the same. I just didn't get the same feeling I heard so many other males talk about. For me, something was missing, and that was the hard yet soft touch that I was accustomed to receiving from other men. Homosexuality, or the spirit of perversion, is something that's not easily conquerable. For some, it's a stronghold, which in biblical context refers to an area in a person's life where sin or negative influences have taken root, making it difficult to overcome through divine assistance. Anything that keeps you from or takes you away from the presence of God is a stronghold. The term is often mentioned in the context of spiritual warfare, where believers are encouraged to tear down these strongholds through prayer and faith. 2 Corinthians 10:4 states, "For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds." For some, they believe their stronghold can become their thorn, something they would just have to deal with. When you embrace that ideology, you are denying the power of God to penetrate that particular area in your life. When you pair your excuses around things that are difficult and your mind is made up, then deliverance may escape you. There are demonic forces that are working behind the scenes and in conjunction with your struggles. Your excuses give them permission or empowerment because they will always have a place to hide, due in part to your own disbelief or the lack thereof, which is hindering you from truly being free. That's not to imply that God is incapable of making deliverance an event as opposed to the journey most same-sex attracted individuals undergo. Success is solely on an individual basis. You have to be willing to separate from people, places, ideals, and things you've grown to love. You have to willingly allow God to renew your mind and strip your heart from everything in it. When it comes to a spirit of perversion, there are other spirits that are often associated with it or fall under a broader perversion umbrella. Some common spirits that can be linked to a spirit of perversion include, but certainly not limited to, are lust, deceit, addiction, rejection, manipulation, and confusion. These spirits are collaborating to lead individuals away from the path of true love and healthy relationship. It's important to recognize these influences and strive to stay grounded in value of love, trust, honesty, and emotional well-being. In order to develop a pathway that leads to freedom, the house, according to Matthew 12:44, has to be unoccupied, swept clean, and put in order. Simply put, every spirit hiding under the umbrella of perversion has to be properly dismantled. It's crucial to address each one individually and work towards healing and restoration. You first have to recognize and acknowledge that the presence of these negative spirits in your life, as well as their influence and harm they may be causing. This is important because it allows you to confront and address how they may be impacting your life. It's a segue that can begin the process of healing and transformation. It's like shining a light in darkness. Only through acknowledgement can an individual start to work towards overcoming it and move towards a more positive and fulfilling path. Essentially, you have to reveal it so God can heal it. Secondly, you have to find someone you can talk to. The devil utilizes isolation as a tool to keep you stuck. There were seasons I felt extremely isolated. I didn't have anyone I could confide in or a person I could pour my heart out to that I felt wouldn't judge my past. So like most men, I bottled it all up on the inside and became an ear for my homeboys as they relived their sexual escapade with random women. Talking about your struggles with someone you trust can help you gain perspective and receive valuable advice. Sharing your thoughts can lighten the burden and help you feel less alone in your journey towards healing and growth. It is also important to take time for self-reflection and introspection. It's crucial because it allows you to gain a deeper understanding of yourself, your thoughts, and your emotions by identifying the root cause. It helps you to examine your actions, beliefs, and motivations, leading to personal growth and self-awareness. Through reflection, you can identify patterns, strength, and areas for improvement, which can empower you to make positive changes in your life. It's like looking inward to discover more about who you are and what drives you, ultimately guiding you towards a path of self-discovery and personal development. Engage in prayer and meditation to seek inner peace and clarity. Ask God for divine guidance in overcoming these negative influences. Establish healthy boundaries in your relationships and interactions to protect yourself from further harm. Many of us are struggling with saying a two-letter word that can save us time, unnecessary pain, money, and sometimes our life. That simple yet impactful word is no. Learning how to utilize it can rescue you from every spirit that's trying to kill your assignment. We've been taught as Christians to put everyone else's needs before our own. Moreover, in the process of being made complete, you have to become self-centered for a season by allowing the process to heal broken pieces and make you whole so you can love, minister, interact with others, whether personal or in a business setting, and maneuver through life from a place of wholeness with your feelings intact. Prioritize self-care, activities that promote your physical, mental, and emotional well-being. Engage in activities that bring you joy, relaxation, and inner peace. Stay committed to your journey of healing and transformation. It may not be easy, but with determination, you can overcome any stronghold and move towards a new landscape for your life. Remember, you are not alone in this journey. Surround yourself with positive influence and keep moving towards a healthier and more fulfilling life. I kept bottling up my emotions and thoughts, but to alleviate the pressure, as awry as it may sound, I had more sex. As a gay man, some days I would put 8 hours in at the office, clock out, and put another 8 hours in at a local bookstore, engaging in any type of sexual activity with random, nameless, and faceless men until my flesh was satisfied. Some nights I'd leave the bookstore in just enough time to go home, take a shower, change clothes, and head back to work. If it wasn't at a bookstore, I'd spend countless hours jacking off on camera with men I'd never meet until the sun came up. The flesh wants what it wants, and lust is never satisfied. Lust is that intense desire for something, often physical pleasure or material possession that can feel all-consuming. Once you obtain what you thought you wanted, that initial rush phase and the desire for something else, something more, takes over. It's almost like chasing a mirage in the desert. James 1:14 states, "But each one is tempted when he is carried away and enticed by his own lust. Then, when lust is conceived, it gives birth to sin. And when sin is accomplished," other versions say full grown, "it brings forth death." As a recovery coach, I would listen to the stories of individuals who were battling addiction. No matter their drug of choice, that first hit was so powerful that they found themselves on this never-ending pursuit to try and recreate that initial feeling. The same applies to people who masturbate. For some, it's an addiction and it never gets old. The initial intensity of the feeling that accumulates when you're about to climax, nor will the amount of semen that flowed from your penile shaft ever be recaptured or reproduced. Over time, you may start adding things to self-pleasuring like sex toys, drugs, or poppers to heighten the sensation. Now masturbation desensitizes you from the natural order of things and it becomes lascivious. Your partner can no longer satisfy or fulfill you because they've been replaced by a feeling of love you've learned to give yourself. Now, like myself, you're having sex with random people off dating apps in the parks, in bathhouses, hotels, public bathrooms, wooded areas, abandoned buildings, trails, truck stops, spas, bookstores, and even cars in an attempt to fill a void only God can fill. A lot of people like to use the excuse, "Well, God knows my heart," or "God knows I will fail and will not always get it right." Both are very true statements. However, Jude 1:24 says, "Now unto him that is able to keep you from falling and present you faultless before the presence of his glory with exceeding joy." Falling is a choice. We choose to fall when we give into the flesh. In retrospect, walking away from homosexuality was not a quest to become straight. It was a pursuit to obtain holiness and righteousness. I had to take personal inventory and ask myself, Al, if you remove sexual immorality from your life, would God still be pleased with it? The response I came up with was a resounding no. God says, "Be ye holy, for I am holy." Holiness wasn't an option, it was a mandate. There were many other areas I fell short of that was putting holes in my bucket, which was preventing me from being the glory carrier God required me to be, effectively impact, empower, and shift the perspective of others. I've lied, I've stolen, I've had a contentious spirit, I was deceptive, my disposition was cantankerous, I was angry, I was selfish, and the list went on and on. In the grand scheme of things, homosexuality was merely a leaf on a branch connected to a tree that had deep roots. Not only did the roots need to be addressed, but the soil of my heart needed to be tilled because I was the weapon forming against myself, causing me not to prosper. In order to kill it and heal from the hurt, not only did I have to identify the voids that existed in my life, but I had to identify how they made me react in certain situations. My actions were simply a reaction to things birthed through trauma, albeit negative or positive. Shame, guilt, and silence were major contributors to the reoccurring cycles in my life. The devil attacks your senses, while God attacks the soul. When God attacks, he has wholeness in mind. The enemy also used condemnation as a trick to make me feel the sin gap was unrepairable, making me believe that God wanted nothing to do with me. Additionally, there were some spirits I picked up along the way that I needed to rid myself of. I first had to come out of agreement with perversion by renouncing and denouncing every spirit God revealed to me that needed to be demolished, which were attached to the same gender loving lifestyle I was indulging in. I had to renounce the spirit of oral sex and anal sex, and the spirit of analingus, the spirit of rejection, the spirit of abandonment, and the spirit of self-sabotage, just to name a few, in order to break every chain that shackled me to my past. The effects of being violated can impact an individual's life and have lasting effects. People who submit and heal can become the light bearers and the glory carriers God needs to work in the earth realm. Survivor's remorse is a complex emotional experience that some individuals may feel after surviving a traumatic event, while others did not. Some of the symptoms of survivor's remorse or remorse can include relationship problems, fighting, blaming, mistrusting, poor communication skills, difficulty with intimacy, and low self-esteem, including self-doubt, self-blame, and shame. Don't be remorseful. Allow God to work in every area of your life, and not just the ones you're comfortable with allowing Him to work in. That's why it's paramount when you're courting to ask tough questions. Questions about their past, family history, goals, previous relationships, communication, and expectation. More importantly, we all ought to inquire if they've been violated sexually and encourage open and honest dialogue by creating safe spaces. Instead, some of you have all these surface level conversations when getting to know an individual, not permitting them to know who we truly are at our core. A couple of days, weeks, months, or years pass, and after the wedding bouquet has dried up, you now don't recognize the person you fell in love with. After the newness wears off, the representative you sat on the phone with or across the table from at breakfast, lunch, or dinner can no longer be hidden. Consequently, the real person or the things individuals work hard at concealing begins to surface out of nowhere. It's always important to be open, honest, and transparent, as concealing one's identity can erode trust and create complications when the truth comes to the light. Being authentic is usually the best way to build genuine connections and maintain healthy relationships, no matter how you feel it may impact or affect the other party. Instead of the lies you've embraced about yourself, stand in your truth, because this world deserves the healthy, healed, and whole version of yourself. It's time to dig. After each chapter, there is a workbook portion of questions that allow individuals to really start reflecting on the life that they live. And so the workbook portion to this says, let's dive deeper. No matter your proclivities, sin may cause God to turn his back, but he has not changed his mind concerning you. Take a moment and reflect about what was shared in this chapter. Spend 10 to 15 minutes journaling your thoughts below. Here are some questions to ponder. How old were you when you first noticed a void present in your life? Question number 2, who contributed to these voids? 3, how have these voids impacted your life? 4, who has been affected by the voids that appeared in your life? 5, how did you try to fill the voids that were present in your life? 6, what will you do differently to ensure voids no longer rob you of your happiness? 7, have you participated in any of the witchcraft rituals mentioned in this chapter? If so, what did you realize were lost as a result of the covenant established? 8, who violated you? The violation isn't always sexual. It could be a person, place, or thing, or ideal. What became the thorns that choked out your word? What became the thorns that choked out your rose potential? Finally, identify some emotions you felt as a result of the voids. We'll revisit this later in the book. It's imperative to identify the emotions, because when the devil is in our ear trying to convince us contrary to what God has already spoken about us, I think a lot of times we fail to apply biblical principles to these emotions, right? And that's how we remain stuck. And so by identifying the emotions, And later on in the book, we identify verses in the Bible that deal with those particular emotions. So when the devil is in your ear, telling you to do this, that, and the other, or trying to convince you you're something different from what God has already spoken, you can combat him with the word. In Matthew, it says how the Spirit led Jesus into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil, and he went on this 40-day fast. And when he came out, Satan met him. And he asked him a couple of questions. If you be the Son of God, turn this bread into stone. Jesus didn't go back and forth with the enemy, but he said, "It is written that man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God." And so it's important to find Bible scriptures that speak to your situation, because that gives the enemy less ammunition to use. And so that was chapter 1 of the book called Perversion. In the book called Perversion, that was chapter 1 from the book Let's Excavate, and also the workbook portion of the book. And again, I'll start doing this, maybe not in its entirety, but definitely putting it out there, because I do know that there's a pack of individuals, and it may not just be homosexuality. It could be individuals dealing with any type of stronghold that needs what God has allowed me to release. And so God bless you. Look forward to talking with you.